Welcome to High on Sci-Fi, a bi-weekly podcast from Jackrow Productions. The following podcast may contain strong language or adult themes and as such may not be suitable for younger listeners. If you have any questions, comments, have a specific topic you'd like to hear our panel discuss, or would simply like a shout out, find us on Facebook by searching High on Sci-Fi.
Episode 2, In Space, No One Can Hear You podcast, recorded Thursday the 2nd of November 2017.
So yes, welcome to High on Sci-Fi episode 2. Now, in the studio with us today, I say studio, it's a living room. So, first of all, he's reversing the polarity of the neutron flow. It's Sean Oxenham.
Hello, here I am. I'm here again, reversing the polarity, as you quite rightly say.
And doing the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs, it's Helen Payne.
Hello, everyone.
And as you might be able to tell, Helen is joining us via satellite link up this week because she's in Swindon still, and we're not.
I don't know what's happened, but suddenly there's all these fireworks going off outside my window. I think someone realised the podcast had just started.
Hooray!
Is there a podcast version of photo bombing?
I have no idea.
There should be.
Okay, pod bombing.
Maybe it's fireworks.
Okay, so obviously this episode we are talking about the Alien franchise. What's good, what's not so good, what works, what doesn't work, and all that. So more retcon ready than an entire series of Torchwood. But before we get into all that, what have you been watching this week, Sean?
Well, obviously looking over Alien films again was one big part of it. I had a good excuse to look back over the film Galaxy Quest recently, which we were just momentarily talking about before coming on air. And I'm surprised how that holds up as a really easygoing comedy sci-fi film. I think we'll go into that more that sort of stuff next week, perhaps. And that was nice to see again. Sadly, I've not had a chance to look at the new series of Stranger Things yet, though. That's one thing I've been looking forward to.
I've not watched any of it.
It's definitely worth a look. I think it's a lot of people are raving about it and saying how great it is, and it's so groundbreaking, and it's also a big nostalgia trip. That didn't come out very well. For 80s sort of retro stuff. That's quite secondary, I feel, to it, and there's been a bit of a drive towards all of that sort of resurgence of sort of 80s horror tropes and things like that. Thankfully, you can watch the program so easily without having any sort of experience of things like E.T. and things like that, which they do obviously pay homage to, but it's good to see that they do something different, something new, and something slightly more interesting with it as well. The second series, though, I've been in two minds about it because I, in some ways, after the first one, thought, yeah, I'd love to see more of it. At the same time, I thought, my concern is that with the first series, they had a great setup. If you've not seen it, I'm not going to spoil it. I'm just going to say the setup is a boy goes missing in a really rural area of America, and that sets up the entire series. The groups of different people come together, and it goes from each group to each group with their efforts to try and find this missing boy. Now, with the second series, I was wondering, well, how are they going to, because the resolution of the end of the first series, no spoilers given, I thought, how are they going to be able to continue that? And my concern is that they'll just be hanging on for a long time until they actually figure out where they're going and what the threat from outside is going to be this time. But that's maybe this. I'm just judging it before actually seeing it at all. But I just don't know how they're going to do it. So I'll be interested to see what they come up with.
Excellent. Now, you were threatening last time to watch Discovery.
Yes, I was. I did watch the pilot episode.
Okay.
Hooray!
The pilot, or because that was the first part of a two-parter.
Yes,
did you watch both parts?
No, I didn't watch both parts.
Right. To get a bit of initial thoughts on the first episode. The fact you only watched the first episode, I think doesn't bode well.
That was partly due to time constraints. I had things to do that day, so I think I would have given it another go, and it was interesting. It certainly created tension quite well and brought in the characters very quickly gave them a backstory, I thought. But it's maybe it's because I'm not a huge Trekkie, but I just didn't find it all that groundbreaking. There was nothing really to hook me into it. And I did kind of wonder who are they making this for? Is this just fan service, or are they genuinely trying to do something slightly different? I know it's been a long time since they last did a Star Trek TV series. Anyway, it's been what?
Oh, crikey. Must be nearly 15 years since Enterprise.
Around that mark. But I just wondered what they were going to do. Because, I mean, if you look at something like Next Generation, which sets up its characters pretty well, and they're very distinctive characters, this really didn't have all that much of that. I know the Michael Burnham character is the main one they're setting up, but they just seemed a bit... And she's a bit of a rebel in some respects, but I just kind of felt they fell very easily into certain, I'd like to say categories, but they're a bit more vacuous and they're a bit emptier. Maybe that develops throughout different episodes, but there wasn't enough there to get me hooked and pull me into want to watching more, I'll be completely honest with you.
Well, I don't know if you're aware or even noticed that you haven't seen the Discovery yet.
Have I not?
Discovery is the ship.
Yeah,
but it's not the Senjin is the ship that you've seen so
yeah,
far.
that's quite right.
What without giving away spoilers, I would say stick through it, because the first 2 episodes are setting up the backstory.
Yeah.
To then bring you up to date in the 3rd episode.
Right. Okay.
And for the most part, it's a different cast.
Oh, I see.
I can't really say too much without giving spoilers.
That pisses me off to some degree. Excuse my language, I beg your
No,
pardon.
no,
I
no.
noticed listening to our last podcast I was swearing all over the place, so I do apologise.
We have a warning at the beginning, so we're fine, covered.
So fuck it. Ultimately. But no, that really annoys me, because just get the hell on with it. Brevity is the sort of wit, if I can be pretentious enough. Yes, again, yeah, another episode to quote from William Shakespeare now, the great sci-fi writer that is William Shakespeare. But just get the hell on with it. Don't bugger around. I know you're trying to set up this great... I mean, oh, come on. You're not writing Citizen Kane. This isn't going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. Just get on with the story, and you can explain backstories later on, unless it is somehow the most amazing thing, and it works so well they've done it like that.
Coming from As the Ghost of Christmas Future, yeah, it does work. Okay. And they have done it for a very good reason. Okay,
excuse my ranting. I retract my rant, and I shall, for the moment, reserve judgment.
Do you know what? The entire Trekkie fandom is completely and utterly split over Discovery. You've got people who are absolutely loving it, and I must admit I'm falling very firmly in that camp, and people who absolutely despise it and say it's not Star Trek.
I'm not surprised.
Well, we've had it every single time. Enterprise did the same. Voyager did the same. Deep Space Nine did the same. You know, you had the same people saying the same things every single time. Now, although series are considered canon, of course Discovery will in time.
Oh, I'm not saying that it's going to do anything massively offensive to... I know some people have pulled up that, you know, in the first episode they've done something which is very much against... a lot of the Star Trek mythology, not mythology, rules, as it were. But that sort of just happens.
I've seen people say it's not a real Star Trek series because the opening title sequence is not set in space. It's like, oh, for God's sake, get over yourself.
Well, that's just artistic license. You are going to have to get... It's a television show to give it some artistic license. I can't see how it would be massively offensive to anybody. I'll give it that, but I just don't... I didn't really find the first episode all that interesting. But like you said, if they're going more into the story and it's a different... This is a setup for a completely different situation. That frustrates me slightly that you didn't get on with the situation. But
it serves a purpose.
Okay, if it serves a really good...
I would say grit your teeth and get through it. Up to you.
But I'm not a particularly patient person, so there we are.
We'd never have guessed.
Oh, really?
So, Helen, what about you? What have you been watching?
Well, I've got a couple of Star Wars things, obviously. The first one to mention is probably the biggest one. For my birthday present, it was quite a late birthday present. I got to go to the Symphonic Star Wars at the Royal Albert Hall.
Oh, fantastic!
Ooh.
Oh, it was amazing. Although I'm not, to be honest, I wasn't really sure what I was going to expect, because I've done back in 2010 I did the Star Wars in concert, and that was that blew my mind. That was just fantastic. You obviously had all the films and selected songs, or not songs, pieces from the films. So when they announced this at the Royal Albert Hall, and the picture that goes with it has all these lightsabers in the audience, but also with the Philharmonic Orchestra, Royal Philharmonic Orchestra with lightsabers. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking to myself, okay, is this going to be just a little bit of fun, or is this actually going to be a serious thing? But then at the end, we all get our lightsabers out and woo. Turned out none of that. Basically, okay. I saw two lightsabers in the whole audience. So I thought, okay, right, this isn't a thing where they want you to join in then. This is just, if you want to have one, have one. They had a guy who, his claim to fame apparently was doing voices on CBeebies. No, wait, it gets better. He claimed that he had met George Lucas and had done a character voice for The Phantom Menace. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, that's not bad. That at least ties into Star Wars. He then proceeded to do the character that he did, and no one in the audience had a clue who he was. I think he got like a sympathetic clap rather than a genuine one. And then, this is the worst part, he decided, I'm going to do a Yoda impression.
Oh,
it was bad. It was bad. In a nutshell, you went from episode 1 all the way through to episode 7, and they had select pieces that they wanted you to hear, and it was absolutely fantastic. The highlight for me was Duel of the Fates, because that's one of my favourites anyway. And they had a choir, so it just makes it even more powerful. And the highlight of the unexpected side of this was apparently 2 members of the Star Wars cast were in the audience.
Oh, right. Do we know who?
Well, he said so this guy, the impersonator that couldn't do impressions, basically, said he mentioned that they were in the audience, and there was a really drunk group of people in the box to my right who, as soon as he said that, were like, where? It's like, you don't even know if he's telling you the truth. I mean, he could just be, stringing you along. But anyway, he said, well, we can't name names, especially for one of them, but I can tell you that the other one is called Natalie. Hi, Natalie. So, of course, drunk box next to me on the right. It's like, Natalie Portman! Oh, my God! And I'm thinking, oh, great. Well, now poor old Natalie Portman, who probably didn't want to be outed, if she is indeed there, is now going to have a queue a mile long outside her box, should anyone find
Phrasing.
No innuendo, men.
Oh, are we sure that she's going to have a massive queue of people asking for autographs? I mean, as soon as you said my heart went, oh, all right, fine. I thought you were going to say it's somebody actually interesting. And I liked V Vendetta.
Oh yeah, she was in that, wasn't she?
Sadly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's assuming that it is Natalie Portman. I mean, there could be another. I don't think it was, but there could be another actress called Natalie who happened to do a Star Wars film. But
one of the extras.
I think Yeah. So.
Well, that's it. Not naming names, it could well be extras. I mean, it sounds like this guy was
blagging it,
pretty much an extra himself.
Oh, for me, he was the worst part of it, and I don't mean to be horrible to him, because he, in terms of being a presenter, he was actually quite good. But the fact that he had to keep name dropping or keep trying to do impressions, he tried to do Scooby Doo at one point, and you just sort of think, I know. You just sort of think to yourself, look, why? Just introduce the song for goodness sake. Sorry, introduce the piece of music for goodness sake. We don't need to know what you've done in your career. But anyway, so he for me was the worst part. But so that was the Symphonic Star Wars, and the only other thing really that I've been catching up on and watching, I sort of classed as sci-fi, I suppose, but I've started watching Heroes.
Oh yeah. Again.
And I'm on. Well, I'd started watching it a little while back, but I'm now on series 3. So I've been trying to get back into it. Have you guys? Have you seen any of Heroes? I know Stu has, because we watched it together. But
I saw the first series, and as per usual, got frustrated with it. And subsequently have not watched any further series, nor will I ever. It just felt along similar lines to, I hate to say it, but in similar lines to Lost to some degree. They didn't really seem to know where it was going, and a lot of the episodes I thought were drawn out. Bear in mind, it has been quite a while since I saw it, so if I were to go back and rewatch it, I might want to revise my opinion there. It just, I don't know, it felt a little bit convoluted at times, and I just really didn't get all that into it. There's not a lot I'm getting into these days. I don't know what it is.
Bit of a pattern emoji.
I'm supposed to be the grumpy old bugger.
All before my time.
Well, I know with Heroes, I only got as far as we watched, Helen, which was about halfway through the second series.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, oh god, pulling teeth with that. Appalling Irish accents. Even Dominic Keating. I mean, Dominic Keating I like, but even he was terrible. It's really going out of the way to be bad, it seemed.
It's a shame. It is a shame, because there seem to be, I won't go on too much about it, but there seem to be some really good ideas. It's just they couldn't quite project that across to the audience, and things, like you say, the really bad actor choices because of the accents that really sounded awful, and some of the special effects, which we obviously, or I should say actually, Stu, that you pointed out a few times with the, even in series 1, the business card. Do you remember the business card? That was
badly cut, yes, and made of paper.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, these things show now on HD TVs that at the time when you're watching a much smaller TV than you would be watching, and it's square and it's further away.
Different aspect ratio, yeah.
Yeah.
But then again, you could say exactly the same about old episodes of Doctor Who as well, but I'm not going to hold it up that way because, I love it so much.
Yeah. But attention to detail, filmmakers.
Yeah.
Attention to detail.
What about you, Stu?
I've been really busy with the old sci-fi. So again, like Sean, I've revisited the Aliens franchise. I watched Thor Ragnarok at the cinema.
Oh, I did actually. Yes, I forgot to mention that, but yes, I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you think?
There was less humour than I was expecting, more than I would have liked.
I'm surprised by that, because the trailer seems to be really, off the back of the success of Deadpool, really geared to be a lot more humorous, a lot more easygoing. But you said not all that much, no?
It wasn't terribly far off the trailer, but I was just expecting it to be joke after joke after joke after joke, which for the most part I think it was. But there were moments that weren't, which I mean, I felt it should have been. I felt it should have been a lot darker. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Helen. With what happens in it, no spoilers, obviously, but with what actually happens, I think it should have been, really dark.
Well,
that's me.
yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but I actually got really bored. And yeah, sort of towards I'd say the first half, I was thinking, oh, okay, this isn't too bad. Thor's got a sense of humour. This is wonderful. And then, yeah, towards the second half, I started to get a bit annoyed with joke after joke in inappropriate sort of situations, which I know people have disagreed with me. But yeah, in terms of the sort of the dark aspect of it, I think they could have gone a lot darker than they did, and perhaps that was what was needed to balance it between the sort of the colourful, humorous world that Thor was inhabiting off Asgard, which I'm afraid I've forgotten the name of the planet, but that was quite colourful and bright and funny. The jokes were happening thick and fast, and then I think you could have easily contrasted that with the dark. I don't see. I'm struggling as well because I don't want to say too much in case people haven't seen it. So yeah. Basically, I think you're right. It needed to go a bit darker in the dark places.
I think, to be fair though, if anyone's seen Hulk versus Thor, Planet Hulk, and is familiar with the Ragnarok comic book series, that's effectively for me what it was, a mixture. Oh, and interestingly, it also threw in the game Marvel champion something. Contest of Champions, Marvel's Contest of Champions, which is a game for like iPads and
I see,
things like that. It actually threw in bits from that as well. I was quite surprised about. Lots and lots of Easter eggs in there. I thought Cate Blanchett did a marvellous job.
Oh, she was wonderful. Actually, yeah, for me, she was one of the highlights. Definitely.
Definitely.
Didn't she look like she was having fun?
She looked like she was, really relishing the role, which you've got to with a role like that. But wasn't Carl Urban utterly wasted? If you're going to put Carl Urban in a Marvel movie, you want a damn sight better character than what he got.
Well, actually, I don't know. For me, I didn't mind the fact that he wasn't on screen more. I thought that actually his accent was more troubling than anything else because I was trying to decide what he was trying to be.
East End Cockney, which of course all Asgardians sound like.
Yeah, but he kind of went into sort of Australian/New Zealand at some point.
Well, that's because he is.
Well, yeah, that's right. So I suppose he must have just flipped.
But it was the one-dimensional aspect to his character, I thought. I just think Carl Urban's capable of so much more.
Oh, well, yes, in that I have to agree. Yeah, he
wasted in the Marvel Universe now.
Just to ask very quickly, Helen, you were saying that you got a bit bored of the constant endless slew of jokes, as it were. Yeah. Do you think this has possibly backfired for Marvel? Because, as we were kind of saying last week, it seems to be they're trying to avoid what DC have done and gone too dark with a lot of their films, and as I mentioned earlier with the success of Deadpool, because that's worked, have they gone too far in the opposite direction, thinking that, oh, we've got it in the bag, we're safe, people know that Marvel make fantastically popular films and the humour's fantastic. Could this be the undoing of them?
Well, from my point of view, I thought it was overkill. However, talking to other people and hearing what they had to say about it, they absolutely loved it and they thought it was the right amount of humour needed. So I think the problem that you've got is that you're not going to please everybody. And you're always going to get people walking out of the cinema divided, I suppose, for lack of a better word. I mean, for my part, I think the fact that Thor himself was quite a difficult character to bring humour to. You know, in the first film, for example, there was humour, but he was oblivious to a lot of it. It was just him being him, and being quite regal and high and mighty, and then things were happening to him, like he was, you know, having cars reversed into him by accident, all this kind of stuff, which is silly humour, but he's not the one that is causing the humour, so to speak. And then you get the second film, and he has a few quips. You know, he tries to be quite charming, but he doesn't do anything foolish as far as I can remember. I'm just sort of trying to remember back now with the film. He doesn't do anything, I don't think, that makes him look bad. And then you get to this film, and like I say, without giving away too many spoilers, he sort of goes a little bit more slapstick. He sort of causes injury to himself quite a lot of the time, and then tries to shrug it off, you know, like with all the bravado and all this kind of thing. Like for me, I felt that some of the humour was forced when they could have had a serious moment. It was a bit like Guardians 2, where the moment was ruined by a bit of inappropriate humour. But in terms of, to answer, sorry, Sean, it's a bit long-winded, but to answer your question, I don't think they've gone too far yet with too much humour, because I still think there's a lot of people out there that really, really enjoyed it. I think you might get people being a little bit shocked if Infinity War turns out to be as dark as I think it might be.
Yeah, I remember what you're saying about that.
Yeah.
I still think it's going to be a musical.
We can.
Oh, really?
That's the direction they're going. Marvel are pissing me off at the moment. The direction they're going with it all. But yeah. But I mean, you mentioned about DC. That was the other thing I watched, was Wonder Woman. Finally caught up with that on DVD.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting to have an origin story after you've met a character, but really enjoyed it. Thought it was absolutely well crafted, well done. Of course, you've got the whole Chris Pine playing effectively the damsel in distress, but he still ends up saving the day, and you know, not so much being the damsel in distress in the end, in his own kind of emotional way. But you know, hey ho. Baby steps.
You're not going to be too bitter.
No, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good film, and I'd heartily recommend it. I'm going over to the dark side. That's what it is. I'm turning DC.
Oh,
I'm staying Marvel with my comic books, but yeah, I'm going DC with the movies. It's the end of the world.
I personally think they've pulled their socks up a little bit, DC, and they've looked at the critical response that they had to say something like Batman versus Superman, and they've really listened to people, and they've made changes. And Wonder Woman helped, you know, because it was a very good film and was well received critically. And the Justice League trailer looks amazing. So yeah, I think they're sort of turning a bit of a corner.
Yeah, well, we'll see what Justice League brings. So,
can't wait.
Moving on to topic for this episode, then, the Alien franchise. Do you know it's 38 years old? 38 years old. Now, when I went back and watched the original, I was quite surprised how well it stood up, actually. So it's nearly 40 years old.
Yeah.
It stands up. I mean, obviously, some like you look at computer screens and they're old style tube monitors and things like that. But
and look, like you could easily play an Atari game on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I can go back further than that with Grandstand and Pong. But yeah. I mean, again, you know, looking at it in context, and I think this is the thing, and I think it's a good franchise for looking at like special effects and how they've evolved.
Yeah. It's good documentation of the evolution of special effects in cinema. Definitely, I completely agree with you there. Yeah,
I'm a big fan of the physical effects. The more I watch the physical effects stuff, so you go back to like the Blade Runner and things like that. where they actually built these sets, these massive cityscape sets.
Yeah.
You know, and the same with Alien. You know, they physically built those sets. The one with the space jockey was 26 feet tall. That set, and it was a real set for one shot, basically.
I know, but it left such an impact. It really, really did. I mean, that's virtually iconic. This is why you've got films like Prometheus, which revisited that. From what I hear, because I'll be completely honest with you, I've not yet seen Prometheus, nor Alien Covenant at all. I've seen in fact, funny enough, the first one I ever saw, which was at the time that it came out, and that was Alien Resurrection, which I would have been... Oh, sorry, we got a bit of interference down the microphones there, I do apologise. I was probably too young to watch it, actually, but it was a friend's birthday, and they hired it on VHS from Blockbuster, and we watched it.
Well, I was about 8 years old watching Alien when it first came on the TV. What my parents were like, my parents, if you listen to this, what the fuck were you thinking? Because it gave me nightmares for weeks.
I don't remember the first RoboCop. Not your parents, of course. My parents. They watched the first RoboCop at about the age of 12 or something. I tried to watch that back when I was in my early 20s, actually, because I hadn't seen it for a long time. And I thought it would be good to watch RoboCop again. I was always physically sick. So the physical effects in that are... Particularly when one guy, I don't think I need to give a spoiler warning for RoboCop. as old as RoboCop. When the guy crashed into the tank and he's all melting, I was almost physically sick at that point.
The Lindsay Lohan moment.
That bit, yeah.
Yeah, I know, you've got a guy there, he's snorting coke off hookers' breaths, and it's a real kids' film.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a bit... but then again, I watched Monty Python at an early age as well, so I came from that twisted,
traumatic. And Freddie Mercury. I was going to say
what?
No, Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street when that first came out.
That would have been a very different film if it had been Freddie Mercury and Freddy Krueger's friends. Stressing around.
That's another. That's a whole other thing. Anyway, So now, what do we make of the Alien franchise? I mean, is it sci-fi? Is it horror? Is it both?
It doesn't need to be categorised. I don't feel it works very well. As I said, of films in their own right. Well, apart from Alien Resurrection, of course, which is absolutely dreadful. I could see what they were trying to do with Alien Resurrection. That's the thing about it. Is I thought. The practical effects in that sort of stand up, but I think what they miss is the limitations that the first one had. For me, the first one is my favourite of the set. I know people say that Aliens 2 is so much better. Actually, I felt it was a bit like Alien 1, but watered down a lot more. The great thing about the first Alien film is these rather unsuspecting people having to deal with this situation and using the tools at hand to do so. And it being such a claustrophobic set as well, they built the entire spaceship to really give the authentic feel, and which works well because the audience have that sense of familiarity with the place after a while, which psychologically works well. You actually feel the fear a lot more because you know where they are, especially when they're being whittled down, which again, that in the way of a storytelling dynamic works really well as well, because I think we've become so used to films, whether it's horror films or science fiction films, many of the horror genre, of course, where people are being gradually picked off, and you can predict it so easily when it's going to happen. With this, it works so it's not quite so predictable, although this is some respect the zeitgeist that's set that up for future films. It doesn't feel as clumsy. It doesn't feel as predictable. It works in a very smooth and very organic way.
Well, that's it. And as the film, like so many things in it have become sci-fi and horror tropes now.
Absolutely.
But actually, they weren't when that came out. They've become it because of that film.
But having seen other films which have those tropes again. To go back to something like Alien and see where it came from, it's still that's where it still feels fresh. I know that sounds like an odd thing to say when you've seen that sort of trope a million times over, but when you're seeing it done in a certain context, and you say that works. This feels organic. This doesn't feel artificial at all, like when it's been shoehorned into something else just because the writer couldn't be bothered to come up with something new to do. And so I realised I went off track a little bit because I was talking about practical effects. I think what they missed, what works really well in the first one, is a bit, and you're going to hold me to testament here because it's not a sci-fi film, and also not one famed for its practical effects being particularly good, but Jaws. I love Jaws. I didn't love the sequels; they're awful. But I mean, obviously the shark didn't work throughout filming, so therefore they had to make do with nothing. And I would have a feeling that obviously with the Alien film, I think it's a bit more of a distinct directorial choice, but off the back of something like Jaws, where less is more. So we don't see much of the alien suit at all. It's very much in shadow for the most part, or just in the darker areas, which works well. It's so much more atmospheric, and there's just one of the bastards. Once you see millions of them getting mown down, I'm sorry, but that kind of takes the sting out of it to me to some degree. And also seeing them in full light, like you do in Alien Resurrection, I don't want to. Don't give me that. Leave me wanting more. Always leave them wanting more.
Alien Resurrection is one I'll come back on.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you mentioned Jaws because there's a little bit of... I've been picking up bits of trivia about the series over the last couple of weeks.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
And there's one that I really like, which is obviously producers have script readers.
Yeah.
So people will read scripts for them and then summarise them in a sentence. And one of the producers, what they wrote was, "It's Jaws set in space."
Yeah. That makes perfect sense.
Oh, okay.
So you can imagine for aliens, they just said, "Well, we're going to need a bigger spaceship."
Oh.
Anyway.
Pretty much.
So what about you, Helen? I mean, is the first one the quintessential one for you, or?
Oh, absolutely. For me, Alien is enough. I don't need the rest of the franchise, quite honestly.
I completely agree.
I think. Well, what for me, what I love about Alien, and I think it is a horror. I think it's the only one that is a sci-fi horror out of the franchise. I think the subsequent ones, well, for me, the subsequent ones seem to be action films rather than horrors. Whereas Alien seemed to be a sci-fi horror, just in obviously my opinion. But what I love about Alien is that you get to know the characters, and you have this lovely slow-burning camera pan that goes all the way around the spaceship, and it introduces you to where they eat and where they hang out, and you get to see Mother, and it's lovely. You see it, and instantly you're thinking, "Oh, who lives here? What do they do here? What's their reason for being out in space?" And then obviously then you get introduced to the characters, and it's nothing is shoved in your face. You get to know things about them through how they talk to each other and their body language, and then so you get a good chunk of the film just getting to know them, and then all of a sudden the reason for them being out there and why they've woken up becomes apparent, and obviously they go off to the alien planet, and obviously things happen, as we know. So one of the reasons why I love that over, say, Aliens, is that you get to know them and they feel like a little family to you. Whereas with something like Aliens, you have Ripley as the connection, and everyone knows who she is and what she's been through, and they sympathise to an extent with what she's going through. But the Marines don't seem to have really much of a personality apart from a select few, and they feel to me like they are just there to be shot at, or sorry, not shot at, what am I talking about, to be killed basically by the aliens. And I don't appreciate personally their stupid banter that they do. It really doesn't interest me. What I love, as I say, is this seeing a bunch of ordinary people who obviously are very good at what they do, because you find out that they are very good at what they do in Alien, And then, as you said, Sean, that how they react to a crisis, which was something that they didn't expect to happen to them, and it really makes you think, oh, well, it kind of could be me. Okay, I know I don't know anything about medical science out in space, or I don't know how to fly a spaceship, but I still feel like I could be one of them. Whereas in something like, I know I'm going to beat on aliens a bit, and I don't mean to, but I don't feel like I connect with any of the Marines at all.
I was going to say much the same thing, actually. One thing that I've been worried about with Prometheus was whether they were going to get the same sort of feel for it as well, because with the first one, as you quite rightly say, they're quite down-to-earth characters. I mean, one of the first scenes where we meet the characters for the first time, they're complaining about the pay. And it's one thing that comes up all the time, is complaining about the pay. It's such down-to-earth, mundane things. It's not scientists rattling off a load of incomprehensible jargon, which I think is done a lot in science fiction, and even my beloved Doctor Who is guilty of doing that a lot as well, which can isolate an audience. But somebody moaning about pay in a very basic sort of job, I mean, it's been dubbed the film which is about space truckers ultimately. That I can relate to, truckers moaning about, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that. Maybe because I'm a moaning old sod anyway myself. I warm to those sort of characters anyway. But it's a really good in for the audience that way. When you establish very early on that these people are just doing a job that they don't really want to be doing all that much, and they're just in it for the money, and there are disputes about pay and things like that. That's an easy handle that we can get on these characters and we can empathise with. As soon as it becomes about Marines or to some degree prisoners or some guys on a spaceship doing something with aliens, and then another spaceship comes along for no real adequately explored reason apart from they've got some people in this, and it all feels a bit convoluted. Of course, in Alien Resurrection, there's no interest. Why do I give a fuck about these characters exactly? Which I know are going to be mowed down, or they had their heads bitten off, or the back of their skull bitten off in Alien Resurrection. Oh, what a ridiculous thing that was! And my concern was, just to finish off very quickly. How was this going to be an Alien Resurrection? Were they going to be a group, much like in the first one, of sort of don't knows and just kind of salt of the earth sort of types who are just in this difficult situation? Or, as I strongly suspect from the trailers, and probably the same in Alien Covenant as well, a group of scientists rattling off scientific jargon that I couldn't give two craps about anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to address the point about Alien Resurrection in just a moment, because I always hated that film, and then I remembered one bit. But I'll come on to that in just a moment. But focusing on the first film versus the rest, basically, I'm kind of with you guys, but for very different reasons. So, in the first film, the alien is exactly that. It is unknowable. It is unquantifiable. It is truly, truly alien. And then you get aliens, and it's like an insect colony, and you've got this queen, and instantly you're trying to relate it, you quantify it,
I agree.
you're putting it in human terms, things we can understand, things we can observe, and that is where, as a franchise, it went downhill for me. Is trying to understand that which we can't understand.
Yeah.
Now, I get that at the same time, a lot of audiences are going to want to latch onto something. They want something relatable. But for me, no. I think, if you've got an alien, make it alien. I know I'm saying this as a Star Trek fan.
Fear of the unknown. Simple fear of the unknown. It works really, really well. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. That's what works so well in a storytelling context.
It's a xenomorph play on xenophobia.
Well, don't they at one point, if I remember rightly, in Alien, they refer to the alien as Kane's son?
Yeah, it's...
And that for me was like, wow, you've taken something, like you say, that we have no idea what the hell it is, and you've humanized it a little bit,
absolutely.
which makes it quite terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. But coming on to Alien Resurrection now, I know it's sort of skipping over sort of Aliens. Aliens was just the action, like you both said. I think it was the action movie. I think Alien 3 tried to recreate the first in terms of you've got people who are ill-equipped to deal with an issue like that.
That
You've
felt
got the
a little
claustrophobic feel, although I think it fell down. And I think the special effects fell down a lot on that.
I will see one. Well, firstly, I think it was quite forced the way they did it. Oh, you mean you've got no guns in this facility? Oh, well, so we're going to have to rely on. Oh, yeah, because it felt a bit forced in that sort of respect.
Yes.
Well, oh, come on.
I think it was
You've
badly
got a
written.
gun. You've got a gun somewhere. Don't be stupid. You're running a massive prison. You said there were thousands of prisoners here before everybody went off and there were only 23 of you left. Of course there's a gun somewhere in this facility. Don't be ridiculous, man.
But what an amazing cast it had, though.
A great cast, but to some degree, for the most part, slightly wasted. They don't all get a huge. I mean, Paul McGann's in there, and he doesn't get a huge amount to say. But then again, I would love Paul McGann because he's a doctor. But quickly on the special effects part, I was quite impressed to find out how they did the alien running along because at that time would have been like in RoboCop and such, where they've got the stop motion animation parts of it, which I don't mind all that much, to be honest, because it's physically there. I can tell it's physically there, and it's not CGI. I was really impressed by how they did it using puppetry to do it. I thought it's an interesting idea, and at that time in 92, 93, when they made Alien 3, would have been where that was just dying out, and they were starting to bring in obviously CGI a lot more. I think it's almost like a lost avenue of way of doing practical effects, and it would have been interesting to see how that could have developed. I'm not saying it's absolutely perfect, but there was a moment where you see it scurrying through a door, and it does it almost like a spider in some ways, and it's something to chill up my spine. The lighting is not great for it; it doesn't composite really well over the image.
Yeah.
But I liked the idea of it. I liked the way they went about it. They got inventive to try and solve this. They didn't want it quite as stop motion, so they wanted to come up with something else to do it. And I think that's somewhat lost in the era of CGI being so dominant, is finding practical ways around doing things like that.
Well, I mean, for me, that alien movement and what was interesting about that was, I mean, it's since become quite a strong part of the canon and the lore, is how the xenomorph actually takes on the characteristics of the host. Now, it depends which version you watch. The original UK version, the host was a dog.
Yes.
But in the original version, it was actually an ox.
Yeah.
And they only changed it because an ox moves too slowly.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. A xenomorph from a human moves quicker than a human, so I don't have an issue personally with that.
That's true.
But yeah, I mean, you could see the animalistic sort of side to it, which worked really well. But just dipping back on the cast, because it's just one of those things I absolutely love, is the deputy prison officer. 85, I think they call it.
85,
is the guy. Have you both seen With Null and I?
Yes, yeah.
You know Danny the drug dealer?
It's called a Simple Whale Carrot.
That's the one. It's him. And it's shocking. He was also, of course, in Star Wars Episode 2, I want to say, as one of the Naboo pilots.
I have no idea. I have my head in the bucket throughout that film, so don't worry.
I got to think now. Yeah, I was going to say, I got to think. Oh.
I am right.
I think it might be Episode 1, actually.
Oh, no,
was it Episode 1? It's one of them.
It
It's
might
one
be
of the
Episode 1.
prequels. Yeah.
I don't know.
But yeah, so...
I'm going to wash my mouth out now, actually.
So that's Alien 3. But Alien 4, now, I absolutely hated and loathed Alien 4 for a long time.
Why?
Because I thought it was shit. However,
Justify your
this
argument,
time watching it, and I want to... so, in between the last time I saw it and this time, I remembered I'd either read something or I've heard it on an interview with either a writer or a producer or a director or somebody. I can't cite where I got it from because it's all become a jumble. But there was one quote about it. It was intended as a comedy.
No.
Seriously, that was the intention. Now, this time watching it back, I've watched it with that in my head, and I feel like I get it more as a movie.
Okay.
And I don't despise it. Like, I don't like it. I have to say that, but I don't despise it the way I used to.
Who was meant to be funny in it?
Well, it's more situational comedy.
Are you calling Alien a sitcom? Hang on a minute. This conjured up all sorts of weird images now.
I know, but yeah, it's like, I mean, all right, it falls down very quickly on that score because it's neither one thing nor the other. But I get what was intended with it a lot more now.
What do you mean, the slapstick level? I don't understand.
Not so much like, but you gave the example of when the general gets the back of his head bitten off and he reaches round and pulls a bit of his brain and looks at it and things like that. It's and I know, I can't. I don't want to be an apologist for it, but at the same time, I get it a bit more now. And I think it's worth rewatching with that in mind. I think it changes your perspective of the movie.
Well, I had a bit of probably the opposite reaction rewatching it. Because
you didn't laugh at all.
No, when I watched it, I would have been about 12 or something when it first came out. No, I would have been younger than that. Like I said, I would have been about 10.
Thanks.
Yeah, just rubbing it in. It's all right. I'm past the point of no return. The red light's flashing. I'm done with Senny. Don't worry about it.
Renew. Sorry. Anyway,
off the carousel. Anyway, but I think I laughed a little bit at moments like that because it just seemed to me so stupid that at the age I thought that's absolutely ridiculous. But I found it funny for that. Watching it again, it just looked a bit sort of. But I didn't even see it as being just stupid. I just thought this is
beyond stupid.
I think also some of the style, the cinematic styles of it, the way it fades in and out of very similar shots, and it's supposed to be establishing a sort of mood. I just found it a little bit, maybe a bit dizzy after a while. I was like, can you just stay on one fucking shot, please? I've not got such a low attention span that I can't watch one thing for more than 15 seconds. Please, just stay still on one shot. Oh, you can't, can you? No. But interestingly enough, a friend of mine lent me a copy of Alien Resurrection. Thank you very much. And I decided to watch. They did a special edition version as well, and I thought, I'll tell you what, I'll watch the special edition one, and I got all of about a few seconds into it and was already annoyed by the intro part. They had this little, I don't know if you've seen it at all, but there's a tiny little bug which somebody squashes, and it's got you think it's the alien because it's got the teeth, and then it pulls out, and it's a little bug, and he squashes it, and it just the CGI was so rubbish. And this is me having a go at effects here when I defend something like Doctor Who, of course. I'm well aware of my own hypocrisy here. I just thought, oh, piss off. I stopped it right there and watched the theatrical release because it was the bits with all the blurry stuff and implying, alien mixed with clones of Ripley and things. I thought it was. I thought that's a bit more interesting. Now I've got a bit more of a mood setting here.
But there was an interesting statement from the director at the beginning of the special edition,
right, yeah.
where he says, "We're not going to call it a director's cut because the director's cut's the one you saw in the cinema."
So what the hell are we talking about then?
A special edition.
Yeah. Why? What have you got to it? Why are you doing a special? What's so special about it? What are you improving exactly that warrants a new release?
Well, that's, I suppose, a whole other topic in of itself, and we can discuss Star Wars at great length on that one. Why keep tinkering with it? But yeah, so
I think. Sorry.
No, go on.
I was just gonna weigh in with my just quick observation of Resurrection. I think the only thing I want to add to that is the whole film for me just feels like they were desperate to try something new because obviously Alien 3 hadn't done very well with the critics or the general audience. I think a lot of people thought that it was just one big mess, really. But that I think was reflected, the problems that the director, I think it was David Fincher, had with the studios, and he wanted his own vision, and they wouldn't let him have it, and he obviously got very disgruntled. And anyway, so there was all that happening with Alien 3, and then I think when it came to Resurrection, they just wanted to do something that was different. I mean, the pure fact that you've got a very different Ripley.
That's exactly what I was just about to say. Yeah,
it's very bold. I mean, you're basically asking an audience who love the first two films and maybe didn't appreciate the third film, to go and effectively go out on a limb and go, all right, let's try something completely different then. You know, you think they might try and play it a bit safe and go back to what worked with the first two, but no, Resurrection really does feel, to me anyway, it feels to me like let's just try this and see if it works, because why not?
And on that point about Ripley being completely different, it doesn't really make that much sense, because this is an established character who is seen as being, you know, the one of the main heroines in all of science fiction. She's such a strong protagonist to have, and a good example as well. I felt that the way she was handled, obviously she varies throughout all of the first three films anyway, and you could to some degree say that the second version is slightly more of a caricature than the original. But this one, in Alien Resurrection, is so much more of that. I mean, it's such a childish attitude. They've gone, okay, what can we do to make Ripley more badass? Oh, I know, she's part alien now. She can do ninja moves and stuff, and she can chuck basketballs, and she can be punched in the face with a concrete block or something, and she's invincible. This is
Sorry, I've just got to cut. So her superpower is being able to chuck basketballs.
Yeah, well, I know, it's such a weird...
I know the context, but...
It just... you mean a bit like she's capable of doing so. She can jump really far as well, if you want another example.
Yeah.
But it's just like, well, firstly, you've just taken away all the suspense there, because now this character is virtually infallible. They're not going to die quite so easily. So there's no tension now, because the aliens, if they come across them, she's just going to tell them to bugger off or something, or lob a hand grenade at them and they're dead. And second, it's just such a simplification of the character. There, in fact, is no character there anymore. I mean, I'm not having a go at Sigourney Weaver's performance. She's a great actor and she's done some great stuff, and is more than capable of doing that role. What I'm having a go at is really, really crass writing of what should be a very easy character to write for.
I'm going to add an interesting point on that. Sigourney Weaver was actually a co-producer of Resurrection.
Yes, she was. Yeah, I know.
Which kind of makes that an interesting...
Well, you wonder, don't you, if she may... I mean, I'm just sort of spitballing here, but maybe she thought to herself, well, everyone knows Ripley. There's not really much more that I can do here, apart from perhaps give her a little bit more of a, superpower, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And maybe she was trying to enhance the other actors that were in the film.
Maybe she had a big mortgage.
Give them a bit of a spotlight, as it were.
Yeah, maybe she just wanted to make the money.
I have a feeling. I have a feeling as well. It was a bit of a cash grab, because the other characters are so, in some ways, even further watered down from the Aliens film. They're even less. I mean, like you were saying earlier, Helen, about there being quite expendable characters for the most part in Aliens. These are even more so. There isn't a distinguishable characteristic.
No.
One guy's a bit of a creepy, I'm a bit of sort of guy type, for want of a better way of...
Ron Perlman.
Yeah, exactly.
Playing Ron Perlman.
Well, there's many films that way. Winona Ryder's character, they're all a bit nothing. There's nothing about them. They're not complaining about pay. They're not having a go at things like that. Yeah. Well, no, there is a dispute about. Well, it's not a dispute about pay. They get paid, I suppose. But what would have been good would have been good to have some tension there would be a dispute about how much they got paid or something. If they got ripped off, suddenly you've got a bit more of conflict there. Drama is conflict, but there isn't any really.
But that's the thing, they're all caricatures.
Exactly.
Which in the context of it being a comedy makes more sense.
I suppose so, but
exaggeration of the personality, as it were.
But what we're judging this on is the film that was released and the intention behind it, not what the origins of the story was. And this happens all too often, I find, when the money, as it were, have their finger on the pulse all the time, saying, "Oh no, do change this bit, change that bit, do this bit." No, we've done our market research and we've gone to our focus groups, and they said that they like this sort of thing. Deadpool's a thing now, so let's do this sort of thing now and more. And you think that it comes out so convoluted. Whatever the original idea was, has been torn apart. I had new bits gaffed onto it, and all sorts of pop culture references thrown in, like "Talk to the Hand" or something to reference Terminator 3 just for a very brief second. How dare I? That by the end of it, it's completely indistinguishable between what the original idea was. So I'm not going to judge it on what the intention might have been when they first started. Now I'm going to judge it on what came out and what I paid my money to go and see ultimately.
So, speaking of that, I'll pose this to both of you then. Was the third and fourth movies better or worse than the two Alien versus Predator movies?
Oh, well, I liked the first Alien versus Predator. Didn't like the second.
I don't think anybody liked the second.
I've avoided all three of them, to be honest with you. Alien versus Predator, Cowboys versus Aliens, I've missed entirely. I just went and stepped all over.
Oh, that's a different...
No, I know.
I'm sorry.
But that's how throwaway it was to me, that I didn't even think to take it all that seriously, because it just sounded like such a money grab in the same ways in the horror genre, Freddy versus Jason or something like that. I just thought, I can't be bothered with it. Why? I mean, what is there to gain from this?
Well, I think...
apart from my money in your wallet.
The AVP movies are definitely considered outside canon now. Because you've even got two Waylands, two separate Waylands.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
No, that was it.
It struck me.
No, all I was going to say was, wasn't it meant to be a bit of a homage to the game? You know, the video game.
Oh yeah,
as well?
possibly.
Could well be. I mean, what was really a shame, I got very excited when they announced an AVP movie, because I remember back in the day you had Dark Horse Comics did Aliens versus Predator as a short run. I mean, there is still to this day an Aliens versus Predator comic, but it was a short run initially, and it was a brilliant story, and that's kind of what I wanted the movie to be. Not some nonsense about an Inca stroke Egyptian stroke Ethiopian pyramid.
Well, funny enough, you mentioned Egyptians there. What I was going to say was that it's I've got Cowboys vs Aliens in my head now. The Alien versus Predator films just struck me, just simply going by the trailers and just the whole idea of the concept outside of the comic books, of course, which I was familiar with. The idea sort of struck me as being a bit like the offshoot of the Mummy films from the early 2000s, the Scorpion King one particularly. It was obviously the first one, which was just a box office cash grab, and it's a bit of a nothing film, to be honest. And then they did the second one, and then an offshoot from that, which was about the Scorpion King played by The Rock, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, the great actor that is. And it struck me as being the same sort of vein as that, so I treated it with equal amount of contempt, to be honest.
In The Rock's defence, he's been in Star Trek.
Good for him.
Has he?
Yeah, episode of Voyager. Anyway.
I think just to quickly say, Stu, because you'd said about comparing it to the to Alien 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me the reason why I preferred AVP to 3 and 4 was it wasn't about the humans anymore. It was very much, well, we've kind of decided, if you like, that they're all pretty much up for, they're going to be the cannon fodder. And you might get a few of them who come out alive, but one of them being the main female actor who I can't remember her name, unfortunately. But the way that it was marketed to people was, forget about the humans. This is really for the people that want to see Alien and Predator just duke it out. And so in that, for that reason alone, you sort of think, well, I can excuse the fact that the characters don't really have any arcs or personalities that I care about, because really it's not about them. It's let's give the aliens their turn. Let's see what they do. And so yeah, for that reason, that would be why I would pick that over the other two.
Okay. I mean, for me, I like canon. I like history. I like stories under stories. I like it all to make sense somewhere. So no, at least Requiem and 3 kind of still can sit within canon, especially in the light of Prometheus and Covenant and the developments there. They can still make a degree of sense. Although,
so what do you...
although they fall in quickly in the face of the first one, Alien, where they talk about the space jockey having been there for thousands of years and is fossilised.
Yes.
So unless
there
there's
was
some
a few
time
inconsistencies
travel involved,
yeah,
it's going to be quite interesting. Although I was, without giving spoilers, on Covenant, I was quite disappointed with the origin story of the Xenomorph.
This is also part of the reason why I've somewhat avoided it. When it comes to a lot of these very iconic films, to go back and want to do, and to some degree with Star Wars as well, to go back and want to do origin stories of things, nothing any writer can come up with is going to be good enough for an audience at all, because what you had in your head is not going to be the same as what they come up with, and that's going to change from individual to individual. Everybody's got their own little ways of filling in the blanks. So I always think it's best just left alone. Let there be some mystery. This is why I prefer Doctor Who, because we don't know his origin, and we never bloody well should find out his origin. The minute we find out what his name is, there's no point in the story anymore. Once I found out he's Barry from down the road who decided to go and do this because he was destined to do so or something, I don't give a damn. I'm not going to watch Barry. I want to watch Doctor Who.
I want a Time War movie. I mean, can't have one now because John Hurt passed away.
No, sadly so, the great John Hurt, thinking back to Alien there. I really don't. Leave that. We got little snippets of it with the 6-minute special with Paul McGann. Great to see Paul McGann doing it again. But again, less is more. Leave me wanting more. Don't overload it. But there are also some big Finnish productions did some Time War stories with John Hurt on audio. So if you wanted more of that, there is a little bit more there. I think you can easily overkill it, though. Because I don't actually think there's, narratively speaking, a huge amount that can be done with it. It's just going to be, oh, now the Time Lords are fighting the Daleks over here. And then that battle happened over there. And now there's another battle over here. And it's with the Time Lords and the Daleks again. Because they're the people fighting. Remember that? And do you know what's going to happen over here? I'll give you 3 guesses. There's only so much you can do with it without it just becoming endlessly just as.
Well, there is the thing about the entire universe being pulled into this conflict, though.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I suppose you could use it as an allegory for the Second World War in a sense, but at the same time, that's kind of what they were doing with the Daleks to begin with anyway. That's so, I mean, just leave it as it is, or find something else to do with it.
I think it's unlikely they'll do anything now anyway.
No.
Yeah. Right, so...
sorry.
Oh, yeah, go
sorry,
on.
I was just going to say about the origins, having an origin story. My personal view on it is I don't mind an origin story as long as there's consistency and continuity. I don't really want to go into too much detail because I think that could be a whole subject in itself. But one of the things, especially with Prometheus, that bothered me, less so with Covenant, but I think it was because I was expecting it because of Prometheus, was when they were trying to explain the way that the beings had ended up on that planet and the whole sort of the life force idea that they tried to put into the mix, and there was all these little ideas floating around that were really, really quite good. but they didn't tie up to the original, to Alien. And I think I spent the whole film just going, yeah, but that doesn't happen because they do this in Alien, so that completely contradicts this, and it ruined my enjoyment of it. So yeah, so that's all I wanted to say really. Was Origin fine as long as you make sure you do your homework?
Well, Prometheus and Covenant haven't yet visited LV-426, which is the planetoid from the first movie. They haven't been there yet.
Oh no, I know, and I appreciate that, but there's the sort of like the backstory, for example, of the alien. What's it called? You know, when it goes into her and she's into him, and he's got it in his eyes, and
the black goo.
You know, it's infecting him, and all this kind of thing. And I'm thinking, well, why wasn't that sort of apparent around Alien then? Where's this all suddenly come into the mix? It just didn't seem to tie in with anything else.
Yeah, I mean that's gone. Yeah, that goes into Covenant far more, doesn't it? I mean, but there's a third one coming out, so we'll see how that ties up.
Well, yeah, hopefully that will explain it a little bit better. But I just, I don't know. That's my only problem, is the continuity aspect. But
the worry is for me is they'll do. I mean, I'm sure they would have learned the lessons from the mistake that was the Star Wars prequels, but the way at the end of Revenge of the Sith, the way that whole episode plays out is it has its own slightly separate story, and Anakin slightly going to the dark side, and it's like the last 20 minutes, I may be wrong there, correct me if I'm wrong there, Helen, but that last 20 minutes where it's all everything's shoehorned in, everybody's put in their positions ready to start the original, and there we are, done. And that explains it all. It's like, no, it doesn't explain it all. I mean, if that's all you were going to do, just show me those 20 minutes and disregard everything that came before it, because everything else is just, this is so shoehorned in to get the characters in their places ready for A New Hope, that it's almost just pissed on everything else that you've written beforehand. Either write an interesting story that does connect, and very fluidly as well, or don't touch it if you can't do it properly.
Yes.
You've not seen Rogue One yet, have you?
I haven't, and I'm not going to.
Okay, I was going to say if you do, have a stress ball handy.
I'm not going to, because I've been fooled so many times in the past by these things. I've learned just to kind of leave well alone. This is why I tend to gear more towards new stuff. This is also why I'm not watching a lot of the superhero movies, because I'm just getting so tired of them. There's only so much. You can't raise the stakes all that high. I understand this is for a particular market who are really big on comic books, and I've got a mild interest at best, put it that way. I'm much more into my films than anything else. But, I mean, like the Captain America film I enjoyed, thought it was good. The second one, I just... Because it told an interesting backstory and put it in different situations, and then he was in the modern world and had to adapt and things. The second one, I thought, okay, it's going to be a similar sort of thing, but just in the modern day. Yeah, I'm right. But you can't keep raising the stakes. And, you know, it's been Hydra, and then it's all... they keep going from big villain to big villain to bigger villain to bigger villain, on and on and on and on and on. You can't keep raising the stakes, and then... But the hero prevails all the time. Without me just kind of thinking, oh, so what? It's giant electric man from space who's made of 1,000 different planets, but no, Thor is still going to stick a hammer up his arse and he's going to die at the end of the film anyway. Oh, give me something else. Come on.
Give him hemorrhoids.
Hemorrhoids.
There you go.
Oh, why did you not keep that in your head?
Anyway, so to wrap up this episode then, going back on the Alien franchise, if you've got to take the entire Alien franchise, I'm talking all 8 movies, so everything, Helen, is it a yay or nay?
What, if I had to have them all or nothing?
Yes.
Oh, no. Oh, that's a horrible question. No, it's just a horrible question. Well, if it's all or nothing, then it has to be a no, I'm afraid.
Okay, sure.
Just ask, why is that, Helen?
I think it's because for me, like I said before, it was the first one that was my favourite, and then all the rest of them, for whatever reason, they just didn't appeal as much. And I think, and I absolutely love Alien. It's one of my favourites. If I had to put it in to a list, it would definitely be in my top 10.
Yeah.
But I could quite easily go without seeing any of the others. So if I can't have Alien all to myself, then it's got to be a no, I'm afraid.
Okay. Sure.
I'd actually, surprisingly enough, say yes, because despite everything I say about terrible schlock being churned out all the time, that's the way it's always going to be. There's going to be terrible rubbish, and every time there's something great that's been made, there is going to be some guy after loads of money who's going to do sequels, prequels, parallel universes, or in-between stories of that thing that worked the first time around in order to prize more money out of the hands of the public. It will happen with every single thing. It happens with Doctor Who, as much as I love it. It happens with nearly every television series imaginable, or film, or anything that's in the public eye that's been particularly popular. It's going to happen to. With that in mind, if you can sift through all of that schlock and find the gem, find the go back to the original thing, or maybe something that came off that which is a really interesting piece of work, there's always going to be schlock anyway. So sift through it, keep persevering, and you'll find that gem.
Can I retract my previous answer and say yes, as long as I don't have to watch any of the others?
I think everybody's forcing you to. Apart from the purpose of you just do what I do, and that's ignore a lot of it. Be aware that it's out there.
That. Yeah, I could do that.
Well, that's it. I mean, for me, it's a yes, because a subsequent bad movie doesn't detract from a previous good one. I can still appreciate the good stuff. Yeah. Even with bad stuff. And I like where it's going at the moment. I mean, all right, there are things about Covenant that I don't like, but I like the fact that they're exploring the sort of the origins of it. I do like that.
I just say as well, I do actually intend to watch Prometheus and Alien Covenant as well. Cool. I do intend to. I've heard mixed reviews about all of them, but I've heard some compelling arguments as to why Prometheus might actually be good. So I will give it a try. Maybe because I'm not quite so close to the Alien franchise, I don't feel quite so bitter about it. And as you quite rightly say, I can always go back to the original anyway if it all goes completely, to the wall.
I really like Prometheus. I like Prometheus more than Covenant, but yeah, I recommend Prometheus any day. So there we are. So don't forget to join us next time, where we will be discussing sci-fi comedies and all that they entail. Yes. So a link for that, John Hurt, of course, he reprised his Jess Burster scene in...
Spaceballs.
That's the one. Yay! On that note, have a safe time, and we will speak to you next time. Bye-bye. Bye.